This is Remote Daily, your daily dose of inspiration. This is Remote Daily, an oasis of innovation. For your mind, your soul, your heart, connect, act, recharge with Remote Daily. This is Remote Daily.
Woo! Hands together, virtual glitter, whatever it may be for Ellie and Dari. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for being here. I am your host today. It is technically my last day on the show, but I have a special surprise for you all that I will be on next week as well to host another dear friend. So bonus day. We'll say more about that later, but today I'm hosting another dear friend, Zoe Bjornson, an incredible human, I don't even know what to say about you, like human podcaster, head of product at Quilt, a woman-led company. If you don't know about it, check them out. I didn't write any remarks to introduce Zoe. I just want to say thank you, Zoe Bjornson, for being here. Say hello, wave hello to the people.
Hello, I'm so excited to be here.
Yay! So before we get into anything, check in. How are you? How is your heart? How is your soul today?
Such a good question. I was thinking about this during the beautiful music and the grounding moment, and my heart just feels so full with all of that beautiful energy, and just meeting a new community is always a wonderful feeling. So thank you to you all for that. And my spirit and my soul is just so excited. I was getting the image or the visual of Tinkerbell flying around. Like, that's how my spirit is feeling right now. There's like so many things going on in my personal, my professional life, and my Zoom life. So that's how my spirit is feeling today.
Oh my God, my heart just fluttered. For some context for everybody, Zoe and I met through this really transformational coaching program for women that we ended about a month ago. It was a 3-month program. And through the program, I saw Zoe go through massive life changes. She moved across the country, started a podcast, a new job. So Zoe, tell us a little bit about your origin story, at least with It's Not Just a Habit, and where you're coming from and how you're coming into this space.
Sure, happy to. It was definitely a crazy 2020 and a crazy 3 months for myself. And reflecting back to about a year ago, I was in a place of transition. I had left New York City, left my job in New York City, and kind of had that moment that many of us have at various times in our lives where you're just, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do next. I don't know where to go. That's filled with a lot of lightness, and it also can be filled with a lot of darkness. I was definitely in kind of that darkness spot. And so I kind of had one of those moments where I realized that it was all up to me. And sometimes we just need to be reminded that our happiness is all up to us. And I just started creating habits that were supposed to be good for you. And while I think we all avoid the should, and we should avoid the should, it was just me realizing that I needed to start working out. I needed to spend more time outside. I needed to connect with other humans in whatever way that made sense for me. I needed to cook, and I needed to do all these things. So I just created a handmade spreadsheet, like bring out the construction paper and the colored pencils and fill out what those habits are and start filling them in. So that's kind of how I started getting into researching habits and using them for myself as a way to understand myself more and understand where I wanted to go.
Ooh. I feel like you packed a huge journey into such a succinct introduction.
A lot.
And I've listened to all the episodes of your podcast. And in the first episode, which I highly recommend everyone check out. You speak a little further about how these habits really transformed your mental health, honestly, and created some structure for a life of uncertainty, which I think we all can kind of resonate with right now. Like 2020, what's next? How do we plan anything? Can I go outside next week? I'm not sure. So, I mean, I think now is a really crucial time to be creating structure and boundaries for ourselves, and habits are a great way to do so. So, Zoe, I want to ask you, if you could pick like 3 top things that we need to know about building a habit building in general, what would those 3 top things be?
Yeah, definitely. There's so much great information on habits and the neurological stuff that happens in your brain when you're making habits. And I started digging into a bunch of different books, and I'll just recommend them now so everyone can add it to their reading list. Atomic Habits by James Clear, and Tommy D, you got number 2, gold star, The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg is really stellar. So you got a leg up in the combo. But a lot of the research that I had done is really distilled into kind of 3 core tips, tricks, whatever you want to call them. And the first one is start small. I think a lot of people, when they're feeling like they need to start a new habit, whether it's working out or some grand New Year's resolution, they go all out and they're like, I'm going to work out for an hour every day, and then I'm going to cook this crazy meal and eat 74 pounds of spinach. And that's just not realistic. You're biting off way too much to choose, and you need to distill it down to the one thing you want to do. What's the needle you need to move? So starting small, and that can mean a lot of different things depending on the habit that you're looking at. If it's working out, it's literally doing 1 push-up each day. If it's drinking more water, it's just filling up your glass after breakfast each day. Not even saying that you're going to drink it, just fill up the glass. So starting small is probably one of the key ones for unlocking habit greatness, if you will. And number 2 is that you need to think about habits as not just one thing, but the loop. And this is actually what Charles Duhigg and James Clear speak a lot about in their books. And a habit isn't just the routine that you have and do, it's also about the bookend. So before you complete a habit, what is the cue or the trigger that tells your brain to do a thing? If you think about a bad habit, you can argue if this is good or bad, but if you come home from work every day, or in this world, if you shut down your computer at the end of the day, you immediately go to the kitchen, you grab a snack, or you pour yourself a glass of wine. The cue there is shutting down your computer. So identifying those cues for good habits and also bad habits so you can know how to change them is really, really key. And on the other end of that, what is the reward? So when you shut down your computer and you grab a snack, you're rewarded by this delicious snack that may or may not be healthy for you. So thinking about what you see as the end outcome in that whole habit loop, the cue, routine, and reward, is also really important into starting and creating new habits. And finally, this one is a little tricky because there's a lot of studies out there that say, oh, it takes 21 days to create a new habit, or it takes 66 days. And another one came out, says it creates 180, it takes 186 days to create a habit. So you're like, how long? What's it going to be? 3 weeks or half a year? And that's really overwhelming. So the best tip when it comes to how long to do a habit is really, you just got to repeat it. It's not about the time it takes, it's about the repetition. Let's say you go all out and one day you're just like, I'm going to do a habit. I'm going to meditate on the hour every hour for 5 minutes. That's repeating a habit. That's going to instill it into your body and your brain more so than anything else. So rather than giving yourself like a time frame of how long you need to do a certain habit, just try to repeat it as often as you can in whatever makes sense for you and for that habit.
Ooh. I think I saw people taking notes. I was taking notes, so send us in Slack after.
I will. I'll send some notes. There's a lot of stuff there.
Yeah. We'll have Zoe join the Slack and send some tips and tricks.
Yeah.
I love all of that. I think what that reminds me of is actually in the coaching program that we were in, Zoe, like we had to do action plans every week. And a big part of the action plan was like, you'd write down the things that you're going to get done, your big overarching goal. And then most importantly, how you're going to reward yourself at the end of the week when you've done all these things. Like it's really important not to just, I'm going to quote our friend Lavina, who ran the program. It's important to celebrate in process, in journey, rather than like waiting and holding out until you do that one big thing. Like celebrate every step of the process, I think is super, super important. And I also love the repetition thing, because I think oftentimes, especially with like things like working out or eating healthy, it's like if I eat McDonald's one day and I broke that habit, like, oh, I'm a terrible person. Like, no, you're not a terrible person. You just
No.
Speaking of though, working out, eating healthy, I think those are habits that, I mean, that's what we think of when we think of habits, I think, and making your bed. So I want to hear from you, Zoe. What are some more, I guess, like atypical or interesting habits that you've seen make room for really big changes?
Yeah, definitely. There's actually another book I'm going to throw into the mix, and it's a tiny book. So if you want a smaller read, it's called Tiny Habits by BJ Fogg, who is a behavioral design professor at Stanford. And he kind of talks about how it's not about building these big habits, but it's about building these tiny habits. And so one of my favorites in that sense is the water example I used earlier. It's not about getting your 8 glasses of water each day. It's just about figuring out what you're going to do before you fill up the glass of water. And I did that myself. I was like, I need to stay more hydrated. How am I going to do this? I can't have a gallon of water on my desk the entire day. I want to be able to get up, and just filling up a glass of water after breakfast each day was really key into unlocking my hydration. So again, it wasn't the typical 8 glasses of water a day rule that we hear and we see. It was something much smaller. And another one that's, you know, typical in the sense that we do it and we connect it to exercise. But for me, the atypical connection was more for my confidence and self-worth. And I started incorporating doing 10 push-ups each morning with my daily stretch routine. And I just kind of like go into downward dog and, you know, move my body in the morning just to get the juices flowing. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to add in 10 push-ups and see what happens. My goal was not to get the most buff arms you've ever seen in your entire life, but I did notice that after I did those 10 push-ups, I just felt so much more confident in myself. I just felt good. I felt strong. I felt like a strong woman. And I would notice if I had a morning call or I was leading some workshops on habits at the time, I noticed one morning I had gotten all dressed, I had my earrings on, my makeup on, I was about to like lead this workshop, and I didn't do the 10 push-ups. And I kind of freaked out, and I was like, oh, it's gonna start in like 3 minutes, I need to be ready. And I hopped on the floor in my bedroom and like got down and did the 10 push-ups. And then I was like, all right, ready to go. And so for me, it was the connection between that like personal strength and doing something for my body and building my confidence that felt atypical. And I never thought like that would be the thing for me, because everyone says, you know, power poses or all these different typical habits that work for certain people. And that was just the thing for me. So again, habits are super personal, and what works for someone else doesn't work for you. So they're all atypical in a sense.
Snaps to that for sure. I was telling Zoe before we went live today that she was telling me about the push-ups, and my nephew, who's like 7, does like 50 push-ups and 50 sit-ups every single day. He's super into Ip Man, which is like a classic Asian action movie. So it gives you an idea what my family's like. But if my nephew can do 50 push-ups a day, and you really want to get in your push-ups, we can all do 10 push-ups every morning, I think. Super achievable. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that story. I want to ask you, you know, we've talked a lot about the habits themselves. I want to talk about the transformation, the big changes that's in your slogan, small things that make room for big changes. So I'm curious, what's like the biggest transformation that you've seen habits make way for, whether in your own life or someone else's life?
Yeah, there's been a lot that have come to mind, and I'll share one example from my breathwork coach who was on the podcast. Her name is Francesca Sitma, and she's a wonderful human being who has led me through a lot of personal change as well. But she shared that gratitude was actually, you know, the big unlocker for herself. And I think we think about gratitude lists as, oh, I just got to write the 3 things I'm grateful for because I should be grateful for them, and et cetera, et cetera. And when you're in one of those darker spaces or mindsets, it's not necessarily about just listing the things, but it's actually about the science behind what that does for your brain. And shifting positive thinking rewires your brain to be more positive and to be happier. So it's not just, oh, I should write the things, it's you're changing the way that your brain works. And Joe Dispenza was mentioned earlier, and that this is a lot of his core teachings as well, is that it's so much more than what you think it does. So habits, specifically a gratitude practice, and keeping that as a habit will do a lot more than just make you realize how much you have. It'll change your happiness at its core. So I think that was just a really beautiful story on her end. And for myself, it was interesting. I don't have like the one habit that unlocked this grand change for me, because like I said, I was unemployed a year ago. I was living at home with my parents, and now I'm the head of product at this amazing audio only social app, working with an amazing team of women who are passionate about connecting communities. And I have a podcast, and I've met so many more people in 2020 than I ever thought possible. And it just feels like a true 180 that like makes my heart jump in so many ways. And what unlocked that wasn't necessarily working out every day or meditating every day or doing the thing, but it was understanding that I was making progress. And for me, that looked like, back to like the homemade spreadsheet on construction paper, it was filling in boxes with a colored pencil. It sounds so simple and so juvenile, but it was so key to unlocking me feeling so stagnant. I was feeling stagnant. I needed a way to see progress. So I started tracking my mood. I started tracking my habits, and the simple effort of tracking as a visual learner. I'm a product designer. So like that is what unlocked it for me. And finding what kind of unlocks it for you could be working out, could be doing the 10 push-ups every single day. But for me, it was just like seeing that progress and being like, okay, I'm lifting myself out. Like I have faith that this is going to do something. And then it did.
That actual small things, many small things.
Many small things.
I think we often talk about like, yeah, baby steps are great, start small, totally. And I don't know if we always take the time to really like understand what that feels like, what baby steps actually are, and like really acknowledge that every step of the way. So thank you for highlighting that. And speaking of, you know, a lot of little things, I want to talk a little bit about building community around habits, because I think one of the things that I find really helpful is not just like forcing myself to recognize when I'm making progress, but like sharing it with somebody else and having someone else be like, that's amazing, and like we're celebrating together. So I want to ask you, what are your plans for building the It's Not Just a Habit community beyond a podcast and really into something where folks can support each other?
Yeah, I love this question. And it's definitely something that's been on my mind, because It's Not Just a Habit wasn't like, oh, all of a sudden I wanted to create a podcast. I never thought I'd be a podcast host. Frankly, I didn't like the sound of my own voice until a couple months ago when I went through all the inner child work that Britt and I did in this course. And I was like, okay, gotta accept this like seen as weakness and really lean into it. But I just started posting little tips and tricks on habits and what I was reading. And so many people started messaging me, and I was sharing on Instagram for the most part, saying like, oh, this is so helpful, or how could I start painting more, or how could I do this, or oh, can you save that story and send it to me? And I was like, okay, there's something here. There's something in the mix. And I kind of started to be almost an accountability buddy for a lot of these people, friends and not, who were messaging me through social media. And so I know the power of accountability. I know the power of accountability for myself in that spreadsheet, but I also know how much it means to have someone on the other side that's motivating you. And that's why people hire personal trainers. That's why people hire coaches. That's why, you know, a piece of probably why remote daily exists, because we need to see someone on the other end of things kind of mirroring back to ourselves. So in the realm of It's Not Just a Habit, I think it can exist in, you know, multiple ways. I have an Instagram, and I'm kind of building that community to be supportive and thought-provoking, so that you can start to add in new habits and new shifts and see that transformation that I personally went through. A future goal is also to have weekly accountability groups, because having another person or other people on the other side is a game changer for sure. So that's another piece of the puzzle. And, you know, having one-on-one accountability buddies to really support and guide people through. And you know, I never thought I would be in a position of coaching people on this, but it kind of starts to feel that way, which I'm really grateful for. So I definitely would love to explore what that looks like, and you know, really getting deeper with certain people on what the habits are that make the most sense for them, and how to set it up, and how to track it, and then how to also celebrate the progress and celebrate the transformation.
Beautiful. And what a perfect segue into the next section, which is I want to open up some space with this community. We're a little over time, but I think we have 5 to 7 minutes to have some community shares. If anyone has any questions for Zoe, or if there's a habit or a ritual that you've been really trying to establish, but you've been feeling really stuck with, we'd love to hear about it and perhaps hear Zoe's thoughts. So go ahead and either raise your hand or just come off mute if you'd like to share. Tommy D, knew he'd come through.
Waiting because I don't want to be the guy that just jumps in all the time. I try to slow play, try to be respectful and fair. So here's the deal. Like, you know, if you've heard me before on here, it's all about networking and connecting. Thanks, John Patton. So, you know, we do this networking, but it's critical even as adults to have this accountability structure in place, you know, like to have those people. So we do these bi-weekly meetings where small pods, 3, 4 professionals, and it's really around what is your 90-day goal and how have you broken that down into bite-sized pieces, and every 2 weeks, where are you with that? And obviously there'll be intermittent check-ins throughout with a text message, how you doing with that project, what's going on with that situation or that prospective client that you were bringing through the pipeline. So that's critical. And personally, being somebody who's has a harried life and clipboards all over my desk and a lot of things going on at all the time, it's good to have people go, hold on, where are we at with that? I mean, with my own business partner, we meet from 5 to 5:30 every single day to have a pipeline discussion. Where are we at? What's going on? So critical to have those in place. So great stuff, Zoe. Thanks.
Thanks for sharing, Tommy.
Thank you.
And thank you for being mindful of space, Tommy. Sorry, did I interrupt somebody? Yvonne.
Yeah, I just, back at the beginning of, I had a similar transformation, and it started with diet and exercise and meditation and all that stuff. One of the key things that I got from Mel Robbins was I was hitting the snooze button every morning. And this ties into that trigger thing. And so what I started doing was setting my phone all the way across the room, because I use that as my alarm. And just getting up out of bed to turn it off was like, okay, I'm up. Now I'm going to go do the thing. So that was just a little something that worked for me.
I'm such a snoozer. I need to stop. Deborah, I see you're off mute.
Yes. So I walk every morning. I started when COVID happened, because I'm a person that goes to the gym. So the gym's closed. So I started walking every morning for an hour and a half. It's about 5 miles. And I started texting. My best friend has a sister who's 80 years old. And her sister and I have known each other, but I started texting her every morning when I would go out and tell her what the weather was. And what I realized was happening between us is that me texting her was making sure that I got up and out every morning. And then that was making her get up and out every afternoon to take her walk. So we started motivating each other, and she looks forward to my texts every morning because she lives by herself. And I look forward to texting her, and then she tells me in the afternoon that she's taken her walk. So it's something that we're able to help each other out, and we didn't even expect that to happen.
I love that. That's amazing.
I love that too. That's a great story.
We have a question in the chat from Felix and Joe about getting back into habits. Like, when you've let something go, is there any advice for getting back into it when it feels like climbing an Everest?
Yeah, I think that kind of goes back to the habit loop and thinking about what the original cue is and also what the original reward is. So we can get tired of rewards. Like when you first start a new workout, it can feel so invigorating and those endorphins are running, and you might just get bored of that person on the YouTube channel or whatever it might be. Like they're just not your cup of tea anymore. So you do have to know your mind and your body in order to shift what that reward is and notice when you're kind of getting tired with it. And just like Yvonne was saying, putting yourself in the environment that's most healthy for your habits is very important. Putting the alarm clock across the room will start to train your body to do the right thing. So if you're feeling like a habit is like climbing Mount Everest, you're probably in kind of the wrong environment, and you can do some work to sort of create the environment that works best. Another kind of quote from Francesca, my breathwork coach, she was like, if you put yourself in a room full of Cheetos and Doritos and Lay's and Ruffles and these chips, you're gonna eat them. If your apartment is full of them, you're gonna eat them. So get out of the chip-filled room and put yourself in a bouquet and bed of spinach. Like that can obviously be translated outside of food, but if your yoga mat is on the floor in your living room, in your bedroom every morning, it's going to start a cue. So it can be just as simple as like putting yourself in the visual environment that makes the most sense for that specific habit.
Thanks for that, Zoe. I see Sarah has her hand raised, and we'll do Sarah, then we'll do Anne, and then question for the community. I'm going off script. Raise your hand if you would prefer to continue doing this community share instead of breakout rooms. Raise your hand if you would like to go into breakout rooms. Okay, everyone's doing this, so I'm just gonna make a call that we're gonna continue sharing and not do breakout rooms today, okay? Okay, thank you. Sorry, Joe, I know you raised your hand for breakouts. You'll get them another time. Sarah, you go.
Just a corollary to the baby steps that I found really helpful, because sometimes I lie to myself, and I think that's a key part of habit forming, is that sometimes we are a little delusional about what we can do. In an awesome book for me that's not relevant to any of you, called How to Write Your Dissertation in 15 Minutes a Day, she mentions that if you set a goal for yourself and you don't meet it, the answer is not then to like increase the goal the next day. So with a dissertation writer, if you plan to write, 10 pages in a day and you do one, then you can't make your goal 20 pages the next day. And she uses weightlifting as an example, that if you can't lift 10 pounds, then you're not going to try to lift 20 the next day. And so I think if you're focusing on your baby steps, but you're making them too big, that you need to be kind to yourself, not see that as a failure, and just recalibrate your expectation.
I love that so much. I think that's a great reminder of the starting small mentality and making the most sense. There's also a book by Gretchen Rubin called The Happiness Project. She's also got a bunch of other books about habits, but that is a great place to start. And she has a quiz called The Four Tendencies, and that will help you understand kind of how you respond to both internal and external habits. So I'm a questioner. Like, I need to know the reason why I got to do the darn thing in order for it to be a part of my routine. But that's another good resource if you're trying to learn a little bit more about yourself as it relates to habits.
Let's do Anne and then Joe, and then we'll close it out. So Anne, go for it.
I was, when you said putting the yoga mat on the floor, that's exactly what I did in my bedroom next to my bed. Like the community here I knew, I had a kind of major kind of breakdown in my marriage like very recently, and I have been not sleeping well, and I have been like, okay, but I don't really, not that there's anything wrong with medication, but I'm going to try my best not to go on medication so that I'd be more present at work, but also for my kids. And so, and the tendency when you're down is that you want to curl into bed and binge watch whatever and snack. But now the yoga mat is out, like, it completely changes my visual, because that's just such a welcoming space that I now am more drawn to than just, sitting there with my computer or my TV or whatever. And I found myself feeling way better. And even my heart rate, because everybody wears like a smartwatch, as they say, like in general, just has lower. So I like just tremendously benefit from it. And like those are all side benefits that, you know, in the beginning it might be very, very small rewards, like, oh, I'm more flexible, oh, I feel less tired. But then in the longer term you feel like, oh my goodness, this has really transformed me. So I think surrounding yourself with the right thing so that to help yourself to build that habit is very helpful.
I love that. Another thing kind of popped into my brain. I don't know if anyone else has had this experience with meditation specifically, but it's taken me about 5 years to really get into a habit of meditating. Like that's a long time. And I don't know if anyone else like immediately got into it, but it takes a bit. And I noticed for myself, the reward for meditating wasn't I was calmer, I was, you know, so serene, and I was moving through life with all this gratitude and peace. It was the fact that when I didn't meditate, I was not the best version of myself. And that's what I noticed. I was like, ooh, when Zoe doesn't meditate for a couple days in a row, she's not who she wants to be. And so that for me was like, okay, the reward is that I want to be a less judgmental, more positive, more gracious person. And I didn't necessarily notice that when I had the habit, but more when I didn't have the habit. So also be aware of those kind of personal rewards and cues for yourself.
Thanks, Zoe, and thank you, Anne, for sharing. Joe Weldon, close us out.
Just to share, there's a reason why I have my 2 guitars visually here, because where my workspace is, so they're physically there. And so especially after an hour of Eleanor and Dario, usually at 2 o'clock, I'm picking up a guitar because I get shamed in how bad I am. But the one, I was just sitting, the lifelong habits that I've gotten into, and this is such an important lesson for me when I was in college. And I may have shared it in a breakout room, and I passed it on to my kids. I was a sophomore in college, and I was just inundated with all this reading, and I couldn't catch up. And I went to my professor, and I was complaining. I said, look, you're killing me with all this reading. I can't keep up with what we're doing. And he looked at me snarkily, and he said, Weldon, what are you reading for pleasure? I said, I'm not reading anything for pleasure. How can I read something for pleasure? You're killing me. He said, go to the bookstore right now, buy 2 books. I want you to start one. This one book could take you a year to finish, and it doesn't matter where you are. When you finish that book, close your eyes, spend 10 minutes thinking about what you just read, and then read the next 10 pages of the next book. Wherever you are, always have 2 books. And I've kept that for 40 years. I have never broken that cycle. I've passed it on to my kids. My daughter got it, so she's doing it. My son, I'm still working on that. But it was one of those lifelong lessons and habits that when you think about it, like I'm not conscious that it's a habit. So just to share.
Thank you for sharing, Joe. I love that. I just want to reflect something that I'm hearing from a lot of folks in the community, which is making habits joyful, pleasurable, like creating an environment where you actually enjoy what you're doing. And like Sarah said, if you don't do that thing, don't double down, like something about it is just not working. So shift it, find something that does work. And usually what works is actually enjoying what you're doing. So with that said, I'm going to close it out. Zoe, last word from you as our habit samurai.
Oh goodness, Britt, I think you took the words right out of my mouth. I think you have to make habits fun and also make habits work for you. That's the most important piece. We're not all the same, so not all of our habits should be the same. And that's what I'll leave y'all with.
Thank you, Zoe. Hands together, everybody, for Zoe Bjornson.